Welcome to the Advocacy and Water Protection in Native California Summer Speaker Series and Certificate Program. I'm really happy to see all of our attendees here today. We are currently in our second module, titled Culture, Advocacy, and Environmental Justice. My name is Kaitlin Reed. I'm an assistant professor of Native American Studies at Humboldt State University, and I'm also a member of the Yurok tribe. And thank you all for joining us today. Before we dive into the program, I want to acknowledge that I am speaking to all of you from Wiyot lands today. Wiyot people continue to remain in relationship to these lands through ceremony, culture, and stewardship. They are important parts of not only the history of this place, but in its future and continuing knowledges of this place. So if you don't know whose land you're on right now, go find out. Okay, educate yourself about the history of the place you live and familiarize yourself with the work that the tribal nations in those places are advocating for. Other ways you can support California tribal peoples is by making a donation to Save California Salmon and/or the Native American Studies Department at Humboldt State University. If you have any questions for our esteemed panelists today during our session, I encourage you to use the question and answer feature through Zoom. We'll be getting to questions roughly around 1 o'clock or so. If you are watching with us on Facebook Live, thank you for joining us. But please use the chat feature to ask any questions that you have, and we'll compile all of those questions and make sure they get to our speakers today. I have a couple housekeeping notes. Number one, don't forget to fill out your evaluation form. If you have registered for the certificate program, you will receive an evaluation form. Those help us figure out different things that we can do better, but it's also how we take attendance and to make sure we can verify your attendance so you can get your certificate. So don't forget. I also want to remind you that if you have missed any of the core courses or any of the electives that you are interested in listening to, they are all recorded and posted to the HSU NAS YouTube page. Our YouTube channel is just called HSU NAS, all lowercase, no spaces. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping I have. I'm really excited to moderate today's panel discussion. It is called Cultural Revitalization on the Water, Canoe Traditions in the Pacific Northwest. So from the San Francisco Bay to Northern Idaho tribes, indigenous peoples are working to restore their canoe and boating traditions and teaching the next generation of canoe makers. This panel will discuss the work that tribes are currently doing to bring back canoe traditions and how this informs our water advocacy and plans for economic independence. This panel will feature traditional canoe revitalization projects from tribal nations in the Pacific Northwest. We will discuss the origins of the project, some of their challenges, and some of their successes. We will also discuss the importance of revitalizing cultural traditions in relationship to water, culture, and identity. And so we have a really highly esteemed panel of presenters for you today, and I'm going to introduce each of them very briefly, but I encourage you all to say a couple more words about yourself as you begin your presentations. Christopher Peters is Palikla and Karuk. He has over 50 years of experience in grassroots community organizing. He has been employed with the Seventh Generation Fund since the 1980s, and in 1999, he was appointed as the president and CEO. For over 31 years, he has served the organization and continues to be its president to this day. His work is especially focused on climate change, sacred site protection, and the renaissance of sacred knowledge and earth renewal ceremonies of Northern California tribal peoples. Chris serves as the Indigenous Peoples Task Force Chair and as a board member of the Parliament for World Religions. He has also earned a BS degree from the University of California in Native American Studies and an MA degree in counseling psychology from Stanford University. Josh Norris is the manager of the Yurok Country Visitor Center and Redwood Yurok Canoe Tours in Klamath, California. He has spent most of his career as a high school English and social science teacher, intermittently working as a community organizer or writing and developing curriculum. Josh is raising 3 young boys in the town of Klamath near his village of origin, where he spends most of his free time on the trails or on the river. And lastly, we have Julian Matthews. Julian is enrolled Nez Perce or Nimipu. He's the co-founder and coordinator of the Nimipu Protecting the Environment organization. He has been active in tribal environmental issues for a number of years and developed programs and activities for both adults and youth near the Nez Perce Reservation and throughout the Pacific Northwest. Julian served 6 years in the US Navy, completed a bachelor's in business administration at Gonzaga University, and a master's in public administration from the University of Idaho. So I'm going to let all of them speak in just a moment, but I'm going to just take a couple more minutes of your time and provide some opening remarks that I hope will help us frame our discussion today. So Native peoples have been in their places of origin since time immemorial. And we've used that time to learn a lot about how our ecosystems function, how they work, and how we can live sustainably in these places for very long periods of time. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with this concept, traditional ecological knowledge is a term that you will see in a lot of the literature when you begin to read about Native ecological knowledge. This will also be referred to sometimes as indigenous knowledge, indigenous science, native knowledge. They're all speaking to a body of knowledge that Native peoples have acquired over millennia, right? It refers to a collective storehouse of information about how the natural world works. This resulting from observation and experimentation and long-term relationships with plants and animals in these places. TEK does not describe a single body of knowledge. It describes literally hundreds of culturally diverse and geographically diverse bodies of knowledge that come from those places. These knowledge systems could be understood as our original instructions about how to be in a place, okay? And these are critical to what Kyle White calls our collective continuance. This is the concept I really like to think with, because when he's talking about what our collective continuance means, it's that we have rules about what we're supposed to do, right? Like Yurok's, we're salmon people, we're supposed to fish the river. And if we don't get to do that, we're not continuing in the way we're supposed to be, okay? And so what he argues is that systems that prevent us from practicing our cultures and our knowledges is an environmental injustice, right? So if we're not able to make canoes, and if we're not able to fish the river, or if we're not able to gather herbs, that is an injustice against tribal peoples. So we need to understand traditional ecological knowledge, not just as like a side piece to science, but as absolutely critical to indigenous environmental justice. I'll end my brief remarks by just mentioning an article that was published about traditional ecological knowledge in Australia. The title of the article is "Indigenous Knowledge is Not a Backup Plan." Right? As we continue to navigate the impacts of climate change, it is going to become incredibly important that we know how to make boats that don't rely on petroleum products, right? That we know how to feed ourselves without huge industrialized corporate food systems, right? And so we need to think about traditional ecological knowledge not as something that is important to just Indians, right? Because it's important, it needs to be important to everybody. So with that, I'll be quiet, and I'm really, really excited to learn more about canoe traditions today, and I'll see you all in the question and answer period. So our first speaker today will be Christopher Peters. Chris, did you want me to pull up Josh's PowerPoint for you?
Oh, no.
Okay, cool.
Josh will do that.
Okay, that sounds good.
Well, good morning. My name is Chris Peters. I am Pulikla, and Pulikla is the traditional name for Yurok. The concept of Yurok is actually a Kuttic word naming who lived down the river. But Pulikla is downriver people, and that's who I prefer to go by. And I've been involved in what we refer to as earth-based spiritual practices, or earth-based spirituality, for many years. And it encompasses traditional Native knowledge. And keep in mind, traditional Native knowledge is you can envision a wheel with many spokes, you know, and people take one spoke out of it and say, I'm using traditional Native knowledge. Well, they're not. Traditional Native knowledge is a paradigm. It's a whole way of thinking and a thought process that can't be applied individually, but is applied in its totality. So some of the concerns I have with the term is that people adopt certain aspects of traditional Native knowledge and say they're using it. Well, fire, for example. The Forest Service says, hey, we're using traditional Native knowledge. But until they adopt the worldview and the thought process that goes along with traditional knowledge, they're not even approaching the concept yet. Pulikla people lived in the lower stretches of the Klamath River for eons of time. We occupied that, and to the south of there, we refer to ourselves as Nurtner. I am Nurtner, and I am Pulikla. Nurtner is a word defining the people that lived on the coast and in the heart of redwood country, unfortunately, or fortunately, that is no longer in our ownership. Over the years of our origin, our cosmology, if you will, our epistemology, we have evolved in conjunction with, we are redwood. Redwood tree, in our understanding, gave us our heart and made us human beings at the time of origin. We needed a heart, and they gave us a heart. And ever since then, when making a house or a canoe we called Othwayach. And the Oth is human. We consider the human as, consider the canoe as a human, a brother, a sister. And we maintain that relationship with boats over the years. We understand, like some people do equestrian therapy, where horses can heal. We understand and we believe that canoes can heal. They'll take care of you, and they'll keep you safe, particularly in the water. So we have a relationship with canoes. We put them to sleep, we wake them, and we feed them. That's our tradition. Over the years, that has evolved in many different forms, but canoes historically have been used as our main source of travel, up and down the rivers, up and down the streams. That was our highways, if you will. And canoes, for all intents and purposes now, have been something to convey us, we ride in, and we put heavy loads in. We use them on an ongoing basis, a daily basis. Historically, there were hundreds and thousands of canoes. They were made from redwood trees. And as we make canoes, we ensure that each canoe has a heart, has kidneys, has lungs, has a front and a back. And historically, older people, they wouldn't get in a canoe unless it had a heart. And likewise, contemporary, if a canoe doesn't have a heart, it's not a canoe. It has nothing, it's not alive. So we understand there is a relationship, a continuity of relationship, as indicated before, that has evolved. We have evolved in conjunction with the canoe. And by and large, canoes were historically made from redwood trees. It was against our tradition to fall a redwood tree. We used trees that were blown over, or we burned around them and took some bark off until they fell down. Folks knew how to build canoes from a redwood tree. And all they had to do is take a chunk of the redwood tree and burn it. And they would know if that tree was a good tree to make a boat with. And if it wasn't, they let it stand. So in that regard, we have that relationship. We understood what trees made the best boats. Unfortunately, historically, there were huge redwood trees all over the place. Many, many different redwood trees, and we could take our pick. Now, as the timber companies, the business as usual people, the expansion, our trees get smaller and smaller. So it's difficult to find a redwood tree with a diameter big enough to construct a boat. And that's the sad situation we find ourselves in today. We don't have very many trees out there. And what we do have, we have to make use of in a good way. And make boats out of wood that would not necessarily be ideal for canoe making. But that's our fate in life. Historically, our people lived along the coast and along the river, and we have many different rocks or shrines that we refer to as wage. They're spirit people that took the form of certain outcroppings, certain rocks along the coast. And over the years, they have been there throughout time. They stand in testimony to our epistemology, to our understanding of place, and how we evolved as place-based peoples. Over the years, we have recognized them and then utilized them, have prayed to them, if you will, have talked to the fire, if you will, and have a relationship with place. And that place, it incorporates our earth-based spiritual understanding, our belief systems. And over this time period, there's evolved some ceremonies. And the ceremonies were passed to us by the wage or by spirit people. And those ceremonies are significantly of who we are. They are earth healing and earth renewing ceremonies. We have a white deerskin dance or Srach Apiaway. And in that Srach Apiaway, we use canoes and a boat dance. We use canoes where folks dress in a certain fashion and convey down the river. And as they do, we have what we call hookmen out front, and they hook out all that is bad and all that is evil from the river, and they toss it in the air. So the river is maintained in a good way, in a pure way, in that fashion. And then we have our earth healing ceremonies, which we're about to do next week after next. And the earth healing dance is sometimes called a jump dance. And a jump dance is designed to heal and to renew the earth. And it has a basket. And we lift up all that is good, all that is sacred, and we talk to the fire. And we stomp down all that is bad and all that is evil. And in that jump dance, we have a boat dance where people dance in a boat and sing their songs and move across the river or down the river or come into a dance. The folks on the coast, we use the lagoons to cross, and we use the rivers. Tribes or Pulikla people use rivers more, and that's how we exist over the years. Those boats are made from redwoods, and they're made in a traditional manner. Now, historically, we had many boats. Unfortunately, because of the conquest and because of many floods and changing of our way of thinking and our understanding, we lost many boats. In the 1960s, we started a canoe project, and they made several boats at that point that are still being used. And in the 1990s, we started another canoe project, and we made about 16 boats, and those boats are being used, different fashions, different ways. And Josh will explain the current efforts to revive and renew the canoe process. And please keep time for me, because I can talk all day, but let me know how much time I have left and where I'm at.
You're doing good. You can take anywhere from another 5 to 10 minutes if you'd like.
Okay, good. So the ceremonies. The ceremonies are earth-based understanding. They tell us who we are. They reaffirm our spiritual relationship to the earth on an ongoing basis. They reaffirm our philosophical understanding, our traditional belief systems in a fashion that no place, no other thing can do. We're not Christians, and we don't come from we didn't trek across the Bering Straits. We understand that we have evolved here in this place. And in conjunction with the canoes, in conjunction with our redwood houses, and over the years that earth-based philosophy teaches us how to be good ancestors, if you will, teaches us to take care of things, how to be in right relationship with the earth. It teaches us respect. It teaches us reciprocity. And those are key points in the evolution of human beings. Now, historically, we'd say we are earth healing and earth renewing people. And I would think that's a fantastic tradition to have. But that's a human tradition. That's not just Indian tradition. That's a human tradition. Every human has the responsibility to take care of the earth, to take care of the earth and protect it from anything that may come adversely in direction, in harm's way, if you will. That's human tradition. Unfortunately, the newcomers don't understand that, haven't understood it. And most of the capital development has evolved in such a way that has destroyed the earth, has destroyed everything that is sacred, everything in their pathway, and would have cut all the trees except for, if it wasn't for the Pacific Ocean, they would continue on and on and on. They cut trees every place. There's less than 5% of old growth trees still residing today. And that's what we have to rely on. We rely on state and national parks to provide wood. If it weren't for the parks, the timber companies would have harvested everything. They would have desecrated the world and desecrated the lands. We are on the verge now of major change, not with only the pandemic that's in front of us. The pandemic is something that is it's been caused by human beings, by our treatment to the earth, treatment to the world, and it has come back on us. Everything we do comes back on us, and the pandemic is something that we human beings have desecrated enough so that it creates a virus that we can't control. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. And not to mention the impacts of climate change and the destruction that lies ahead of us in terms of climate change could be awesome, could be major, and could change the thinking of human beings. And to a certain extent, I've always maintained that by force or by choice, we will make a change. By force, the environmental conditions will be such that will cause us to change. We will hit the proverbial wall and we'll have to change. Or we can make a choice. We can put together an intellectual, rational reason to make change. And we could do it consciously. We still have time to do that consciously, to make the change that we necessarily have to make, will make in time, before we hit the wall that we encourage people to change and to be better ancestors. So I'll stop right there and be available for questions.
Oh, thank you so much. That end was so powerful. Like, change is going to come, whether the settler state wants it or not. Josh Norris will be our next speaker. Josh, would you like me to pull up the slides you've shared, or?
Yeah, if you would.
Okay, cool. Let me get that pulled up. Give me 1 second, everybody. Okay.
And
okay, can everybody see Josh's PowerPoint?
And
awesome.
And you're controlling it. So okay.
Okay.
So
did you? If you wanted to do it, I didn't know if it was easier for me.
I'll tell you next. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, you can go ahead and. So Chris explained what Oshwe is. So Ayukwi, friends and family. Today I'm going to share some of my perspective about the intersection of cultural revitalization on the river, economic opportunity, and decolonization. And so what I hope to pass along today is a definition of cultural heritage tourism that combines cultural revitalization with economic development as a way to continue cultural revitalization, make it stronger, and sustain our communities and make us stronger. So before I start, next slide, please. I want to say that I don't profess to be a cultural expert, and I'm not speaking for an entire group of people. I've been a teacher and an organizer and planner in Klamath for the last 15 years, and I was a teacher in Los Angeles before that. So my perspectives are a collection of all the learning I've been fortunate enough to experience throughout my life, and I welcome any criticism and pushback for what I say. So before I start, I just want to, as a classroom teacher and as someone who taught Native studies, I always sort of started my class off with these sort of rules that I follow for myself when I talk about culture. So I just want to sort of impart that. Number one, I can't define your culture for you. I have a problem when people come in and say, well, this is your culture, and then they define what that is. So I never attempt to do that. Everyone has their own culture and experiences their own culture. I can't blame you or judge you for what your culture has taught you, okay? So when people are speaking from their experience, their learned experience, and from what they've learned from their cultures, I can't judge that person based on that. And then finally, culture is fluid and ever changing. And that's what gives me hope in life and why I continue this work and continue teaching and learning about culture. And I want to thank, first and foremost, my elders and culture bearers for all of it I have learned from you and changing my perspective and my ideas. So I'm going to start next, please, with why I think cultural revitalization is so important. So earlier this week, for example, I was doing some research on canoe history, and I came across an article from the Daily Alta California in 1865, titled Klamath Indians. The article is about how settlers along Klamath came to discover that the Klamath River Indians are physically and intellectually superior to other California Indian tribes. So the author says, we'll call them Indians instead of diggers, as a compliment, I guess, and continues, in physical development, they are scarcely inferior to whites. So the article goes on to tell an anecdote to prove its point about how clever Indian who made a clever comeback in a tavern and why we're so clever. And at the end of the article, the author concludes that the clever Klamath Indian will go the rest of the way the rest of the Indians and be virtually extinct within a matter of years. And there's a quote there about that. And of course, we're even dangerous, even if there's just a few of us left. Now, before we all express our shock at how racist people were in 1865, I want to challenge you to consider that that was not that long ago, okay? For Native people, 1865 was like yesterday. I want to also challenge you to consider that level of racism and that narrative of the extinct Indian continues today. Go ahead and next slide, please. Why else would I have had to prove to my high school students in inner city LA that natives still do exist, let alone still practice our traditional ways, and not horses and teepees, by the way? Why would my colleagues and I at Del Norte schools have to take it upon ourselves to write social science curriculum that accurately represents local Native tribes and have to continue to fight for this curriculum to be taught to our own children in our own schools? We encounter racism throughout our lives, and it's compounded by the additional narrative that real Indians no longer exist. Take the Trees of Mystery in Klamath, for example, where the logo is the image of End of the Trail, famous painting that depicts the Plains Indian at the end of the Trail of Tears. Inside the museum at the Trees of Mystery, you'll find a collection of Native cultural items encased in glass. This is the most popular tourist attraction in Klamath and the only experience most tourists have with any local Native culture. Most of you probably recognize the iconic statue of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox there. And so I live about half a mile from this museum, by the way. And the museum right now is totally packed. They get hundreds of people going through there every day, even through this pandemic. Now, people might say that, this all seems pretty harmless. In fact, they might be well-intentioned, and it might be an intention to honor natives, right? Sound familiar? They don't cause direct harm the way poverty and direct racism and lack of resources do, but it perpetuates the racist myth that we're all too comfortable with, that the real Indians are dead, and Paul Bunyan, who symbolizes this unabashed expansion that Chris was talking about, is an American hero, right? And I'll touch back on that a bit later. So imagine growing up being told one narrative at home about the strength and power of your traditions and the struggles your ancestors endured, like forced relocation and boarding schools, and then being told another story outside your home within the dominant culture. Imagine being taught at school that the heroes of the country are the ones that enacted the policies that nearly destroyed your people, and then being treated like you don't know what you're talking about when you challenge this dominant narrative. I've had so many stories from students who've experienced in the classroom where they try to say, well, this is what my family or what my culture says, and then the teacher challenges them and say, well, that's not really what your culture is about. Countless stories from my climate students on that. So this is what it's like to be surviving in two worlds. On top of that, imagine being told by the dominant culture that you're not a real Indian because real Indians don't exist anymore. This duality is not only painful to endure, but it's coupled with, our living in poverty and enduring historical trauma. I think I can go to the next one now. Oh yeah, that's still the trees and mystery. I forgot about that one. Yeah, so that is I'm not sure if that is an actual canoe that was carved by a Yurok or not, but it has a narrative there. And clearly, if you know something about our canoe traditions and you read that narrative, it's not accurate. So revitalization of our cultural practices can serve as a means of healing and creating a new reality for us. Teaching indigenous languages in schools is proven to be effective in improving academic outcomes. When the kids' cultures are validated in schools, there's obvious benefits to self-esteem and engaging with their learning. This is why I'm deeply grateful to the efforts of the Yurok Tribe's language program, for example, for working diligently on revitalizing our languages and bringing language classes to our local schools, and those in higher education teaching or taking native studies. I know this is making a difference in our kids' lives. Thank you. Those of you out there who are doing that. So next slide, please. Our Yurok cultural practices are beautiful. Our ceremonies, songs, food, and knowledge of the land are what sustains us and provides meaning and gives us hope. You can go to the next one, I think. And I'm ever grateful for the reemergence and resurgence of our traditions, and and especially because a lot of them were almost lost. I'm especially thankful to those in Chris's generation who made sure this knowledge was passed along to my generation. Thank you. However, next slide, please. There are tremendous challenges, and that's acorn paddle carving. Next one. I'll walk Glenn Moore, who's a canoe carver. Next one, please. Okay. We still face tremendous challenges in trying to keep these traditions alive. Cultural practice not only requires the recovery of cultural expertise, which is often scarce or forgotten, but also takes a tremendous amount of time and resources, which are also scarce. Time is one of the most limiting factors in what we can do to revitalize traditional cultural practices. Traditionally, people who specialize in basket weaving or regalia making or canoe carving dedicate their lives to perfecting their crafts. And I'm in awe when I think about the amount of time our present day artisans devote to their craft, and often wonder how they do it. So Often our interface with these cultural practices is fleeting and limited to a few workshops or classes, or when we get home from long day work and we can't dedicate the amount of time necessary to really perfect it. Next one, please, I think. Oh, okay. And another major challenge is lack of physical resources that are necessary to restore our cultural practices. Obviously, when we're talking about food, materials, and resources, the decimation of our fisheries and traditional gathering grounds has been one of the main limiting factors in sustaining our cultural practices. And I'm ever grateful for those who are busting their asses every day to restore these resources. For those who are working in watershed restoration, fisheries, ecology, resource management, policy, and so on, I'm ever grateful for you. Thank you. And finally, the lack of monetary resources. I think I can go to the next one. I'm not well coordinated here. To sustain these practices is severely limiting. We occasionally get a grant to pay for cultural experts to teach a skill or a class or workshop here and there, but they're not paid enough to make a living off of it and afford the necessary materials to sustain their practice every day. And when it comes to building redwood dugout canoes, of course, all of these issues have severely limited the practices, as Chris has alluded to. Over the last 40 to 50 years, we've lost a majority of those who had firsthand knowledge about canoe carving. The skills were only passed on to a few remaining individuals, mainly because of a lack of time and resources, namely the lack of available redwood logs with the quality needed to carve canoes. Today, there's only 2 living treble members who are considered master carvers. There's one of them in the picture there, Porty Blake. And many would-be carvers have had to wait 10 years or more to get a log suitable for carving. So lack of suitable logs, decimation of over 90% of the redwood forest has obviously limited our ability to sustain the practice. And as many of you know, the old growth redwoods today, as Chris pointed out, lie mostly in parkland. And up until recently, their policies have been extremely limiting in regard to what we're able to harvest or extract for use for this cultural practice. So now I'm going to jump to the story about about the effort that I'm involved in to restore this practice and how we hope that it will make this practice sustainable and carry on and spread and grow. So I think we go to the next one. 2015, that'll work. The Yurok Tribe Transportation Program acquired a grant from the National Scenic Byways Program to promote tourism in our area. And part of that grant was used to conduct a feasibility study into running a traditional dugout canoe tourism business. This study, conducted by LSC Transportation Consultants and our transportation department, which at the time was headed up by our now chairman, James, surveyed tourists in our area to see what their interest might be in such a tour. The response was resoundingly positive. The majority surveyed said they would pay, and there was like, I think there was over 100 people surveyed, said they would pay over 100, and they would pay $100 to $125 to $150 for the opportunity to take a 2-hour tour in a redwood dugout canoe. So as soon as I heard about this idea, I was stoked. I was immediately hooked into it because, you know, all my experience as an educator, as an organizer, I had seen and, you know, experiencing this frustration of people trying to bring back these cultural practices, but facing severely limited resources, as I said before. This just seemed like all of those things, we might be able to solve all those problems by having this sort of tourism industry grow. So this year, 5 years later, was supposed to be our opening year. We went ahead and did a business plan. We got everything planned out. We got logs to carve canoes. We actually have carvers carving canoes right at this moment. So immediately when we started implementing our business plan, some of those sort of log jams, I guess that's I don't know, good analogy, but that we faced sort of started clearing. People became very receptive to the idea, and all of a sudden more opportunities opened up. And I think the important thing, next slide, please. I'm not sure what, okay, no, you can go back to that first, the last one, please, because that's an example. Yeah, that one. Okay. So one of the opportunities that opened up is that we have an agreement with the Forest Service, Six Rivers National Forest, to extract and harvest resources for cultural purposes, and included in that is some downed redwood logs. Well, a number of things sort of happened that went our way. They got a new director, and we have some real advocates. But I really think that what was the tipping point was that we're going to make this process of harvesting the logs, of carving the canoes, and providing the experience of being in a canoe to the public. And I think that really, made an impression on people, and they're really grateful for it. So we got approved to harvest up to 6 logs from the Redwood Experimental Forest here in Klamath, which actually lies somewhere behind our Trees of Mystery. So the logs that you see in that picture there are actually some of those logs, and they're sitting on our watershed. And we contracted our watershed department to help us pull those out. And so this project has actually employed a lot of people in doing something that, and learning about something that is culturally valuable. And like I said, now we have 2 carvers working on contract, Porty Blake and Dave Severns, who learns from master carver George Wilson. And so there's carving going on. There's learning about carving going on. We've had kids. I think I might have some pictures of kids. If you could flip to the next slide or two. They might be out of order, sorry. Oh, I guess I didn't put them in, I'm sorry. Okay. So anyway, well, we've had school groups come in and carve with our carvers. We've had tourists come in, and it's been a positive experience. And just recently, we were scheduled to open, of course, in June 1st. And obviously that didn't happen because of COVID-19. However, we have been able to continue with our, oh, I forgot to mention another opportunity to open up is we got a grant from the national parks called the Maritime Heritage Grant. And that was to actually train apprentices in carving and paddling canoes. And actually you see a picture right there of what we're doing now as a result of this grant. We've got these guys from the Ancestral Guard who are learning and teaching the practice of canoe paddling, navigating. They're also developing curriculum about culture, history, and our fisheries issues, and all kinds of things that we could share with people who come through. And in that way, we're providing a counter narrative that to the sort of narrative you saw there at Trees of Mystery. And the other thing that we're doing is we are practicing our social distancing and wearing our mask, by the way, as you can see, is we're providing rides to local community folks here in Klamath and other tribal members as well. And we're learning from them. So we have elders, for example, the other day we had an elder in our canoe, and we were going down the river, and she grew up in Waukell, and telling us all these stories about Waukell and the floods. And Waukell, sorry, is a village along the Klamath. And so we're learning all that and taking it in and documenting it, and we're going to be able to share that with other people. It's just been a really a beautiful experience. And so that's been actually one of my favorite parts of this journey so far, is being able to interact with the community and people that come through. I just think that the learning has exploded exponentially, and it's just created a great opportunity. I think I'll stop there. I'm not sure how much time I have left. If folks have questions.
Thank you very much, Josh. That was excellent. I loved the photographs you shared with us. We'll have time for the whole panel will do a Q&A at the end, but I want to introduce our third and final speaker, Julian. Let me pull up your PowerPoint and then we'll get started. Okay. Thanks for being patient, everybody.
Okay, maybe first I'll give a little kind of blurb about myself.
Oh yeah, that'd be excellent.
Okay, my name is Julian Matthews, I roll Nez Perce, and I'm from what they call Mutalima, that's upriver people. And I don't know if all the audience has been to Idaho, or within our treaty area, original treaty of 1855 area, we have the largest amount of roadless and wilderness area in the United States, except for Alaska. And so that's something that's always been critical for me. When I began, prior to doing this stuff now with the canoe carving, and I was involved with a group called Friends of the Clearwater that were working. They're always fighting the Forest Service because there's a lot of big battles with the timber industry, mining industries up in these roadless and wilderness areas. And so they were really instrumental. And so I saw they were pretty much defending a lot of our treaty rights to hunt, fish, and gather within the 1855 treaty area exclusively for Nimipu or Nez Perce. And so I hooked up with them, and then finally got some other Nimipu or Nez Perce on the board. And so we started working on kind of collaborative issues. And so the areas that we, or for I know I guess territory is a modern term, our treaty area, and usual and accustomed, we hunted, fished all up and down the river, Snake River, Clearwater, Selway, Locksaw, Salmon River, Clumbley River. We still have treaty rights in those areas to take salmon. And like Chris was saying earlier, these salmon are really critical to our ceremonies and our traditions because we have them at meals, services, whatever, you name it. We have first salmon ceremonies, a number of these, and plants and medicines that we use, say for instance in the sweat lodge that we dig, and that we're trying to protect these areas from timber cuts, gold mining, and those types of things. And so that's one aspect of our group that is really critical. We work with a lot of other groups, Earth Justice, and one thing, like I know you're taking this class, and we had a big issue about a lot of the non-Indian groups. They didn't know anything about tribes, treaty rights. And I know we have a treaty, some tribes don't. You know, they have executive orders. Coeur d'Alene to the north have executive orders, so that's different than a treaty tribe. We have treaty rights, which are agreements with the federal government. When we ceded the land, we didn't sell it, give it away. We ceded it to allow them to use it, and we retained certain rights, and that's written in the treaty. And I was telling someone this morning, they should look at the treaties, particularly our treaty, because we had an issue with someone did a video on a snake, and they claimed it was for another tribe's traditional area, and I told them that was within our treaty area, so it may have been their homeland, but it's not now, or not according to the treaty. And so things like that come up where non-Indians don't really understand a lot of the treaties or whatever, what governs kind of the relationship we have between the federal government and the tribes. And so anyway, we started with our group. Chris's group, 7th Generation Fund, helped us a lot. A lot of other groups helped us, Hope them out. And so we, how we started out thinking about a canoe, we had what they call, at the time, Free the Snake flotillas, and they were on the Snake River, where there's 4 dams, hydroelectric power dams, that are half earthen and half concrete. And so that's a critical issue when people talk about removing them or breaching them. Breaching them would include removing the earthen part where the water would flow more freely and allow the smolts to, they don't swim. That's one thing people kind of assume, they swim back to the ocean, but no, they're supposed to float. Like when the eggs or the baby salmon are hatched, they're supposed to be able to float from, say, up the Selway lock saw or up the Clearwater. They're supposed to be able to float to the ocean, and then they develop and then they swim back up. But now with those dams, it's really impacting both ways, going down and coming back up for the salmon. It's really decimating. They're pretty much almost to extinction, some of the runs. And so that really impacts our tribe, our culture, and even me, like being able to take fish, under the treaty. Like the tribe sometimes works with the state and they close the fishing because they got some hatchery deal where they get the escapement and they have to have enough eggs for the next year and things like that. So, but those are just some background things on the issues that the Canoe project is part of, we're trying to push. And so anyway, the summer of 2015, we had a Free the Snake flotilla at a spot called Hawaii, and it's upriver from Lewiston, Idaho, or Clarkston, Idaho, or Clarkston, Washington. So we met up there and we had a bunch of watercraft, different people coming there, and the purpose of it was to bring attention to what we wanted to breach those 4 lower Snake River dams. Lower Granite Dam is right next to it, and there's a reservoir behind it. And so we floated down there from Clarkston and then did some stuff, just some drumming, singing close to the dam, and then we floated back. And so during that time, we didn't have any canoe, we weren't really thinking of, but there's a lot of other tribes, like I say, Kalispell, Spokane, and Coeur d'Alene, and I think there's some Colville there. These are tribes from, Coeur d'Alene's are in Idaho, the reservation, the Kalispell, Spokane, and Colville are in Washington, Eastern Washington, northeastern Washington. So they came there, which was great, support us in our effort to breach those dams. And so they had some other canoes in there. So that made us thinking about that we should, or they were talking to us, hey, you guys should carve a canoe. So then we thought, yeah, that's a great idea. And then I started looking into it. We had some people met with the park, try to find out who was carving canoes, who had carved canoes, how do you do it? Do we have plans, or how does it exactly come about that we can carve a dugout canoe at our tribe and, use it in these Free the Snake flotillas, or just use them in general, take the kids out on them to experience the river. And so anyway, it took a while. Then we met with Jim Jameson. He's a non-Indian. He's carved canoes all over the Northwest, up in Canada, with Alaska, First Nations and stuff. So he came to help us, and then we had some other people, Adam, I think his name, Adam, and then some other people, non-Indians, that helped us because they had carved canoes. And so we started working on it. And so we had to, first of all, like people are saying, we had to get the logs, okay, traditionally they would use cedar logs because they're softer and they don't rot as quickly as, say, fir or pine. But then we had Adam and Gary Dorr, a tribal member, went up to the Selway lock saw and to check for some couple of logs. And like someone was saying about, when I told they wanted to cut one down, I said, I don't want to, it's an environmental group, we're not going to be cutting down the logs. And so we found a couple that the Forest Service helped, and we found them. And so then after that, since it's in Rovis and Wilderness area, you can't just, albeit we have a treaty right. I guess we could have just went up there and taken it and said, Forest Service don't tell us what to do. We have a treaty right. But then I went and talked to the councils because we're trying to keep our Nez Perce Tribal Executive Committee involved in our activities, because good or bad, we still may need their help later on. And so Sam Penny talked about a special use permit that we could get, the tribe would write and give to the Forest Service, and that would allow us to go get the logs from the site up in the Selway or Selway River. So we did that. And then next step was to bring the log down to Lapway, to the site. We call it the Nimipu Canoe site, where the tribe had allowed us to use an area, maybe about half an acre, and to do this. And so they were supportive, did a MOA, went through the process, had an MOA with the tribe and land services and all that. So we got the site, and then we had to figure out how to get the log down there. So I found out that most loggers, there's a lot of loggers in Idaho, they won't haul one log. And so, and then I found out another term I never heard of, a self-loader. I didn't know what a self-loader was, I know now. And so anyway, I found a guy that would deal with the self-loader, haul one log down, our log, and it's a yellow fir down to our site. And so then we got it there. And of course, then Jim, he's a real great guy, canoe carver. We had to find out what tools. He had a lot of tools, adzes, etc., axes and stuff. And so I went and bought our own, and I think scorps, different types of wood carving tools, which I'd never really used too much. And so we got a bunch of those, have them now. And so we started started planning how we're going to work on it, who's going to do it, how many people we could expect, etc. And then and one thing that they did that was they had to figure out, or we had to figure out, like put the log in the water, or the Clearwater River is down at a boat ramp, and see which side, how it floated, like what was the middle. So they marked that. And that process was pretty hilarious because they were trying to put the log in the water and they're all getting wet and stuff. I was kind of watching because I was working at the time. I'm the HR director at Enterprises. So this is an avocation, I should mention. And so they marked the log. And so then we knew how we could start carving it. So go to the next one, please. Okay, so then, so we got the special use permit, wilderness wilderness area. And then I remember, I'll never forget, on the first day, we didn't have this covering like it shows in there. This is a later one when the kids were there, but we didn't have a covering. It was like 105 degrees, and we probably had about 8 people. And it was hot, 105. Lapway is kind of, they call it the, I don't know, it's really hot. And it's right along on the river, level with the river. So it's whatever they call that. And so anyway, we started carving that first day, or pounding on it with the axes and adzes, and 105 degrees. So I figured next time we probably have about half those people. And that was true, because half of them didn't show back up because they thought it was too hot. So then I got the idea of buying a canopy. So I bought a canopy, and that helped a lot. And okay, go to the next one, please. Okay, so then after we got everything with all the tools, got everyone set up, and then originally, well, we have a video that Earth Justice paid for, Undersoul Media made, and I talk in there about, I really didn't know, like after we got the log down there, I knew Jim would be cool, and I was interested in carving, but then I didn't know if we would even have enough people, or if it'd turn out to where we start being able to carve, because it's a lot of work. I mean, you can only really have maybe 3. I think ours is 23 feet long. And so you can only have maybe 3 people if you're using axes or adzes on it working at one time. So I was kind of unsure if anyone would show up or who would show up. And so we started in July 2017, and had talked to the Lapway Elementary School District. It's on our reservation. Lapway is the headquarters, I guess you could call it, of the tribe, Nez Perce tribe. And so talk with the elementary school, and so then they had this after school program for, I don't know what it's for, extra study time or something. And so we asked them if they could come down there, and so Bo Whitford, he was the teacher or the instructor for that program, so he said, yeah, they could start coming down there every Wednesday for about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So we got hooked up with them, and so they started coming down there in August, and they've been coming ever since, every Wednesday. And this year, of course, with coronavirus, we shut down, I think around March, when the school shut down. And so, but they've been coming every Wednesday. It's really nice. And then we'll have the 4th and 5th graders, and then sometimes the 2nd and 3rd graders will come. And like I said, if you watch our video, A Healing Journey, you'll see the kids out there carving, I mean, little kids. And it's really cool, because this probably is the best part of this whole deal, this environmental thing that we're doing, is working with those kids, because we're teaching them something that I didn't learn. No one ever talked to me about how to carve a canoe, or make paddles and that type of thing. So it's really great to me to be able to do this because the kids are really great, and we feed them every Wednesday. We feed them, have sandwiches and different, or maybe have a barbecue, hot dogs, whatever. And so we been doing that. And then we also had David Paul. Can't remember how he found out. I think he came to the flotilla, but he said he was working with the Coeur d'Alene tribes. They're about maybe 2 hours north of us, doing paddle making. And so he said he could come down there and start teaching the kids paddle making. And so he started coming down there, I think about the same time, maybe a year after, about halfway between when we're done with the canoe, the dugout. And so he started coming down free of charge. You know, I've offered him money, say gas money. He said, no, that's all right. He really likes to do it, really good guy. And so during the time, like other people have said, or Josh was saying about, we had so many different people come through. We had people, you know, adults, travelers, people writing books. Like I said, we had Earth Justice doing the video. And so I had so many people there. And then it was interesting because I guess I should say when I first moved to, I'm a native California. I was born in San Jose. My mother went there from Kamiah under the Indian Relocation Act. That's something that your students might want to look up. A lot of people don't know about that. But that was kind of another method to get people off the res. And I don't know exactly what they're trying to do, but kind of make them assimilate. And so anyway, I was born down there, and then we moved back up to Coeur d'Alene, lived with my aunt who was married to Coeur d'Alene, or they weren't married. I think they were living together. And so we lived with them for about a year. Then so I grew up in Coeur d'Alene, and then after that, I went to the Navy, come back, been at my tribe since '94, and then worked here in the Coeur d'Alene tribe. So anyway, now when we were doing the paddle making or the canoe making, I started posting on the Facebook, and one thing, I never even had a Facebook at the time and a website, and I didn't have no idea how to do it. So Lewis from Seventh Generation Fund helped set up the Facebook, and then Hope of Mountain, another group kind of affiliated with Seventh Generation, they do like help new startups, and so they did the website. And so I started putting pictures of the website or the activities, like with these kids here, and you know, whatever they're doing, canoe carving or arts and crafts. We do a lot of arts and crafts with them too, because they really like that, paint these little birdhouses, kind of a trip. It's really cool. I really like to do it because it's something they can do that they want to do, and so we're trying to let them kind of be a free expression. So anyway, when I was posting these pictures on the Facebook, the Salish Kootenai tribe, some tribal members, they saw them, and then I started talking to them, say, yeah, it's really cool. And they said they wanted to carve one. And so probably, I think it was in January, it was really kind of crazy weather from over there to over here. And so about 5 or 6 of them come there, and this Willie Stevens, he was kind of the cultural guy, and then his wife was the vice chairman. So we called our council, a couple of our council chairman, vice chairman, told them to come over there and meet with them, because we wanted to kind of just, you know, plug what we're doing. And these guys were, one was the vice chair, so it's kind of a big protocol thing. So they came there, and then they started doing a paddle. And then we talked to them about it, what it takes, tools and stuff. I gave one of the books we had to buy the tools. And so they finished theirs, I think, not too soon after or far after we finished ours. And so that's pretty cool stuff like that. And we had other people come, and it was really interesting, the whole process. And so maybe go to the next one now. Yeah, and then so like right now, since we like I was saying, when we first tried to figure out like how to do it, then there's one of the workers, I can't remember his name, Bob Chenoweth, actually. He had some kind of blueprints from a canoe. He'd done a bunch of research all over the world and with the tribe, and they had some old canoes down there that were all rotten, and basically for a display, I guess, at the park site in Spalding. And so he got the plans. We started looking at those. Jim looked at them, and then we started kind of using those as a guide to how we would do the Nimipu or Nez Perce canoes. And so one thing that really baffled me was that we tried to find out someone who had actually carved a canoe, or it always kind of actually still sticks in my mind why they stopped carving them, you know, because they talked about some, like I said, had a couple at the park. It just kind of is still baffling to me. Like, I don't know why they stopped carving them. People say it have different reasons they give that. But so anyway, we couldn't really find any like master carvers within our tribe. So essentially what we're trying to do is teach the kids to carve. And like the picture here shows them, kids love to do those paddles, and they can do their own design on them, paint them, whatever, however they want to do it. And so that was a big issue to me. And then when we finally finished it, then that's what it was, the first dugout in 110 years on the Nez Perce reservation. There's another person, Alan Pinkham Jr. He lives in, or he carved a couple up in Wallowa, in Wallowa Lake. I think he uses that lake, but up in Joseph, he carved a couple. I think one was done before ours. I think he does it by himself or has some help, but he carved, I think he's carving some more too. So he's doing it up there at Wallowa Lake. That's where Chief Joseph originally lived. And so he does it up there, and they have a museum. I think one of them was in the museum, Giuseppe Museum. So anyway, so we did that, and first one, 110 years. That wasn't such a big deal to me. The big deal to me was that we had actually got it done. And the thing, like I tell people, the main thing that I liked about carving our canoe was having the kids there. They were really energetic, really loved to carve it, and that really helps to me to keep the adults inspired, because sometimes the adults, we're all burnt out. Like someone says, I work full time, so we go there, but then those kids come there and they're just like really energetic, and so that really helped a lot. And then we finished the canoe, like I said, in 2018 in July. We're getting ready for the flotilla in 2018. I think it was in September that year. And so we took it on the water for the first time, did a little ceremony, had some songs, and prayer by Lucinda. She's our resident, I call her our resident tribal elder. And so it floated great. And then maybe go to the next one. Okay, so then probably talk about the canoe. So we put the canoe in the water and it floated great. And we had a bunch of other tribes. There's some other tribes come down there and support us, kind of like the first maiden voyage, I guess you could say, of our canoe. And so we did that. And then also, like I explained earlier, we had a video, Earth Justice. When we had I think it was in 2016, we had the Free the Snake Flotilla down at the Chief Timothy Park. That was one of our chiefs. They named a park after him. So that, anyway, Chief Timothy Park, and I kind of was, I'm the coordinator for our group, kind of a schmoozer, nice guy, marketing guy, finance guy. So I was talking to Earth Justice and Maggie Caldwell about giving them a couple of our t-shirts, because I know that would get them remembering us. And so I gave them a couple of our t-shirts, and we started talking about doing a video. And so they said they would do it, Earth Justice, and because I know they've been working a lot of different, the attorney was working on the Standing Rock case later. And so I knew they were interested in this stuff. So we had, we started doing the video. And so it was one thing that, so after we got the video, the video was done after a few months after we got done carving the canoe. Canoe floated in the water great. And then the one issue that we were mainly intertwining with, like other people are saying, we have these 4 dams. Well, there's a lot of dams up and down the Columbia and Snake River. And so what we were trying to emphasize with the canoes was that we also, just as the salmon couldn't go up and down the river like they once did, or were able to do more easily, Nimipu couldn't go up and down the river as we once did to hunt, fish, gather, or whatever, and use the water as a mode of transportation, I guess you could say. And so that was one thing that we made sure that we brought up, was that we were looking at how the water was being impacted by the dams, not only the fish, but even the water. The reservoirs behind are really bad for fish, and there's all kinds of stuff that it's really sad once you read about it, what those salmon have to go through. And so that's one of our major pushes for this canoe too, was the dam breaching to restore the salmon runs as much as they can be. And so I know there's other tribes, Klamath tribe is working on some lower Elwha, so we know it can be done. And that's really our big battle, along with other groups, Sable Wild Salmon, different groups that are supportive of that. And we're working with them to try to at least breach those 4 lower snake. And so our next step, I've been working on getting a cedar from that same area, cedar log through the Forest Service, and then bring it down there and start carving the cedar, because we haven't carved the cedar yet. And so we'll probably get that going here maybe the end of August. I think in Idaho, you know, with social distancing, I want to make sure if those kids come back, we do everything right, because I want to start carving a cedar log canoe, because that's kind of more native to what we used before. And one thing someone was asking us about burning out the log, and you know, that sounded like we got all some rocks just like we do for the lodge. It's got a bunch of logs, got a barrel of water and stuff, and we're supposed to start doing that. But then I start thinking about like right now it's about 100 degrees down there. So I thought, well, if we're going to burn it, then someone's going to have to be here all night and all day. And most of us work full time, so that wasn't really feasible. So we just continued carving it, learn how to use the adzes, these different, what they call, if you ever get into it, butterflies, where, you know, that's one thing about the cedar, like I said, it's softer and doesn't rot. The problem with the canoe we have, well, it's not too bad. It's not bad now, but it dries out like it's yellow fern. So the different types of wood dry out faster. So it cracks, and then you got to repair it. So we use these, what they call butterflies, to replace the cracks. So that was pretty interesting. I learned that. And so we mainly want to just continue kind of using the canoe carving to bring back the issue of the culture and the traditional value that was attached, and also to respect for the culture, or the forests and the water, because right now, as someone also said, the way the water is used, I was thinking about that the other day. I went by Riggins, and a lot of it seems to me from historically that these water, forest, timber, land is just commodified, where it's based, you know, the people or businesses that came out here or whoever will put a value on it, like, okay, so this water is worth this much because we can build a dam, generate electric, so it's worth this much, or we can whitewater raft, or we can kayak and charge people to do that, or sell a lot of kayaks to people that want to go on the Selway Locksaw, which is, I think they're class 4 or something. I don't kayak or whitewater raft, so I don't know, it's class 4 rapids or something. And so, or the timber industry wants to go in there. Well, this forest, because we always have constant battles with the wilderness and wellness, because people want to go up there, you know, all these loggers that, you know, log, their family log, they log, their grandfather log, so they want to come in there, cut all the timber because it's just sitting there. And, you know, to me, that's really, it comes down, like Chris was saying about the spirituality of it. You know, these are living things. The waters are living. The log that we use, we thank it for letting us use it for this purpose, and the trees and the plants and everything are living. We're a part of this. That's like I always tell people, we're a part of this. We aren't the lords over it or the masters of the world. We're a part of it, just like the creator. We're a part of this, made us. We're a part of this environment, and so we want to protect it too, because a lot of the plants, rivers, waters can't speak for themselves, so we have to do that for them, and we want to protect it. And that's why we call it Nimipu, protecting the environment. And it's like someone else was saying too, it's not our environment. The Indians don't assume this is our land, this is our forest or our water, that it's there for everyone, but we want to make sure that we can include, co-opt as many people into it to protect it. So it's there for the future generations, whether it's Indians, whites, you know, whatever, that we protect it for the future. Because if we keep going the way we go, the salmon are going to be extinct for everyone, not just the tribe, for everyone. And so we're going to have to protect that and look at the hydroelectric power that's, you know, destroying the river basically to make money for different purposes that I don't agree with. So, but anyway, I'm just glad.
I hate to interrupt you. I could listen to you talk about this project all day, actually. But I wanted to just let you know we only have 15 minutes left of our session, and we have lots of questions from the audience. And so I was wondering if it was okay if we transition into our question and answer period. Sorry, I hate interrupting you. My apologies. Okay. I'm going to stop my screen share here, so you should be able to see all of our panelists now. And we have a bunch of excellent questions that I want to get to. Let me access them. Here we go, Q&A. All right. Our first two are both for you, Chris, so I'm going to combine them. First is, how do you spell the words for upriver and downriver people that Chris Peters used? And the second question, which is also for Mr. Peters, Mr. Peters, I understood you to say that the Forest Service burning in traditional ways is not enough without traditional beliefs or the relationship with the earth. How do you and the other speakers feel about non-Indigenous people participating in traditional Indigenous earth-based ceremonies? So I will turn it over to you to
I'll take the last questions first. I think first of all, the concept of traditional ecological knowledge is holistic. It encompasses a paradigm, it encompasses a worldview, and to take bits and pieces out of it and apply it and say they're using traditional native knowledge is erroneous. It's not traditional. It's one aspect of it, and without the totality of it, things can go from bad to worse really quickly. Burning is a good concept, and I think people need to burn. Native people burn for gathering and for basket making and for whatever, and that's significant. I'm sorry, I forgot the last question. The spelling certainly pick it up. Pulikla and Petchikla is up the river, down the river. Yurok and Kaduk is up the river and down the river. And like Julian had mentioned, they have an up the river and down the river people too. So, depending on the alphabet they use, whether it's tribal alphabet or the international alphabet, the spelling may be different. So they can look it up.
Julian or Josh, was there anything you'd like to add to the question about non-Indigenous peoples participating in earth-based ceremony?
I don't really know what they mean by earth-based ceremonies.
Yeah, I use the term earth-based spirituality or earth-based ceremony. I have some concerns. I think everybody has their own belief system that they need to find out where they come from and what they do. They can't borrow native traditional belief systems and expect that to conform to their DNA, their personality types, and their own spirituality. The quest is looking for their own identity, and that is a step. I think as we move into issues of climate change and move into the current situation that confronts each community, that traditional belief systems can offer a few steps in the right direction, but folks have to find their own identity.
Yeah, and I think, to me, with people, like, that's what I was saying. I know, well, we just had a bunch of people come up that they're the rainbow gathering, and then they had a big issue about whether they should go, or some of them didn't want them to. And then so I went up there, talked to them to see what they did or what they were like. And then we had other people, tribal members wanted them out right now. Don't care what they do or say, they want them out. And, so it's kind of like I said, go up and talk to them. It's just like with, I was saying, when we first started working with a lot of non-Indian environmental groups, there is a lot of difference between like they're talking about recreational opportunities, and I guess my recreational opportunity in the Clearwater and the Snake is swimming, I'm not a kayaker or whitewater. So I think that's kind of what they're probably insinuating. And, it's kind of like those rock climbing, that's cool, but it's kind of like a academic type mentality, college. And so we had to talk to them about why we want salmon, not to sell them, but for our ceremonies and things like that, or just to have it because that's a food. It's like the first food that we had is salmon, and there's a lot of other ones. But so that kind of, I would just talk to them, and most people will be, some tribal members, they'll get mad. It's kind of like when we have lodge, if someone invites a non-Indian, it still seems kind of weird to me, or which is fine. Like I had some of our providers come, just so they kind of learn about what we're about. But then it's just sometimes some people may feel uncomfortable, some people may not. It just depends. Like if they're talking about, attending an activity or something, just talk to the people. Most tribal members will tell you straight up whether they want you there or not. So
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say is it's not natives' responsibility to teach white people. You know, it's the non-native people have to learn themselves. You know, we have our hands full learning our own identity and keeping that in a continuing process. So we encourage non-native people to look to their elders, look to their community, do their own research, find out who they are. And the earth-based concept, you know, we are from the earth. We're not from heaven. There's no concept of heaven or hell, you know, and you know, Jesus Christ was an illegal alien here. You know, he came over with the boat people, doesn't belong in this part of the country. And neither does Christianity, you know, and I think we need to be aware of that concept, that we are not Christians. We don't believe in that system.
And they understand the idea of like sacred land. Their holy land is just somewhere else. Okay, I'm going to group these next. We have lots of questions, so I'm going to group these two just so we can get to as many as possible. So part one is, can you elaborate a little bit more on what makes a redwood or other species of tree like ideal for canoes? So what characteristics does a tree need to have for it to make a great canoe? And second part of this question is, how does water quality and poor water management and dams and all of these other assaults on our river impact the ability to restore canoe traditions? So what are we looking for in a tree, and how does water mismanagement impact canoe traditions?
Oh, Chris, did you want to take the tree one, or?
Yeah, I can take the tree one. You know, unfortunately, we have to use what we get now, but historically, tight, straight grain makes the best canoes. Redwood is softwood, but there, like I indicated in my presentation, there's a relationship between Pulikla and redwood trees. That relationship goes back to our origin. Our cosmology has it. And that relationship is key to building canoes. And canoes are easy to carve. We burned, like Julian had mentioned, we burned canoes. All of the resin in the canoes go out and keep the canoes firm and tight, but they do crack. Cedar is the same way. The Kaitlin people, the Hupa people use cedar, Port Orford cedar now, white cedar. And likewise, straight grain, good grain, it works the best. Grain with few knots. Knots are terrible.
I want to introduce Sammy Jensaw here, who is right now training to be our canoe captain, one of our canoe captains. He's a member of the Ancestral Guard and also a former student of mine. And he's been out on the river every day. Already went out once today for a couple hours. And we have been discussing this question of how we're gonna discuss the issue of the depletion of our fisheries and so on and so forth. So Sam, did you want to talk a little bit about that and how you're going to address it in our tours?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And,
yeah.
Like you said, my name is Samuel Jensaw III, and I come from the village of Requa. And it really makes me think about, just this morning, we had a young tribal member in the boat, first time they've ever been in a redwood canoe. And as we're pulling out, we look river left, and the first thing we see is microcystis that has overtaken an eddy right there, right where we're pulling out our boat. And he asked, what is that? So this is a question that when we answer these younger people, it's something that they don't understand, but they see it on a daily basis when they grow up on the river. And even though they may not understand what it is, they know that the ill effects and how it's affecting our people on a daily basis. So educating our people while we're in the boat, being a part of a redwood canoe experience automatically puts you in the right place and time to ask these type of questions, to become more concerned and more connected to the environment that surrounds them and us. So when we talk about this, we talk about, you know, the historic trauma that comes with these dams being on our river. We talk about how it affects the salmon runs and how it's going to continue to affect the runs of the salmon. And even as of yesterday, with the deals that was handed down, you know, it is a curveball to see that. And we do talk about that. And we need to educate our people, because the more people are aware, the more they have the ability to care. Because if people don't understand what's going on, then they're not going to have the ability to invest their time and love and devotion into fixing and creating solutions.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that experience. Chris or Julian, is there anything else you wanted to add on to this question before we move on to the next one?
No, that's what we're looking for, a cedar now, and that's what a lot of Nez Perce mimiku use. So when because it's softer and it's doesn't rot so quickly and dry out. So but all those things, you know, if you leave it out in the sun or stays dry, then that'll affect the log wood. But I learned a lot from Jim about wood. I mean, I grew up in the woods, but I know he knows a lot about. It's really interesting what you start doing, and it's kind of like Samuel was saying. When you get on the river, it's a totally different. You see so much different stuff, and because like when you're driving on the freeway next to the river, like our casino's right next to the river, and drive that road every day, the highway back and forth to Lapland. But when you're in the water on the river, it's a totally different experience, and that's what we're trying to. Like he's saying, that's really good they do that because that's what we want the kids to get out there and experience that because it's really interesting to that experience how you feel when you're on the water. Because it is something that is traditional for our people to be on the water. And so we're trying to instill that kind of experience with the kids.
Thank you. So we have a couple questions that are interested in kind of maybe this tension between cultural practices and economic practices. So the first one that is kind of on this vein is, are there any critiques of canoe tours? What are those critiques and what are your thoughts or responses to them? And then there's also a more broad theoretical question about how do you determine the appropriateness of a project for business as it relates to like cultural traditions and practices. And this participant elaborates, for example, I know basket weavers who will not sell their wares, but gift them away. How is this applicable or not applicable to canoes and tourism?
So I guess I can start. Yeah, we have received critiques and criticism, and I just want to sort of delineate between. I was going to do this in my talk earlier, but I didn't quite get there. When we're talking about economic development, often, I mean, it's sort of it's a loaded phrase, right? People often think about capitalism and greed and you know, a lot of negative sort of images associated with that, corruption, people taking all the resources for themselves, and also the history that we've had with of course the raping of the land for these purposes, right? Economic development is not just about money, okay? It's not just about greed. It's about sustainability and survival of our people in the future. People have to make a living, and so this project here to me says, okay, this is the decolonization part that I was alluding to earlier. Okay, this says, okay, we're going to make a living doing what we do. We're practicing our traditions and our culture, and that's okay. And yes, there are things that should not be sold, that should not be shared with the public, but I don't believe that the redwood canoes, unless it's being used for ceremonial purpose, of course, is one of those things. Traditionally, we use canoes to ferry people, all sorts of kinds of people, across the river. And some of those people we charge. We don't charge our own people, and if they need a ride, we don't charge them. But take the first explorers, settlers, miners, for example, that they would not have been able to explore and settle without the canoes being involved. So there's a history there, and you know, this part of our culture is a transportation. It is ceremonial, but we're not sharing that part with the public. I don't know if you wanted to.
What basically I came onto this. We've been working with canoes for a while now. We've had the opportunity to teach families and children and people in our community about the importance of redwood canoe and how important it is that people understand that we are not invasive species as indigenous people. A lot of the land management practices, they view indigenous people as people who are encroaching on on natural places. But the reality is we are part of this world, and we will continue to live our lives and be who we are and do what we need to do to succeed and thrive. Our people have been living and depending on this river for thousands and thousands of years, and we will continue to do so. So this right here, I came on this platform because it gives me the ability to extend these services to tribal members and families and bring up a whole new generation of redwood canoe paddlers and carvers and teachers, because that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, why I do what I do is so one day I will not be needed anymore. And that's what we dedicate our time and everything towards, is that to make sure that this future generation has enough knowledge passed down to continue what they need to know to continue to allow our people to grow and prosper.
Thank you so much for that, like, insightful critique, that assumption that economic development needs to be capitalism, right? Also, I would argue that, like, this economic structure the settler state has imposed on tribal nations, like, we have to navigate it for our own survival. So it is not hypocritical to, like, navigate that structure to reclaim culture. Melissa Nelson, she's an Anishinaabe scholar. She uses the phrase trickster capitalism. So that might be a reading folks can go do after our session. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I want to acknowledge and respect that our presenters are very busy people and have a lot of work to do in their communities. I apologize that we weren't able to get to all the questions in the chat. I will share them with the speakers, and if they are able to, maybe they can respond at a later date. Thank you so much for all of you who came today, all of you who asked questions. I want to give a quick reminder, please fill out your evaluation form so we can count you as present for our session today. And also I'll give a quick plug. Next Friday, our session will be talking about indigenous food sovereignty and what does it mean to recover our indigenous food systems? Why is that important for not only our cultures and our physical health, but also the environmental health as well. So I hope you will all join us next Friday. Let's all give a virtual round of applause to our speakers today. And thank you all very, very much for coming. I'll see you next Friday.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Kaitlin.
Thank you all.
Chris, Sam, Josh.
It's good to see you guys.